Welcome to another edition of Big Whiteboard Wednesday, and today we're just going to have a little bit of a chat about the wind, how it affects the surf, how you can predict it, and the way it makes the waves different in terms of riding them. So we're very lucky here on the equator because what happens is we have very little weather and wind that comes from actual storms. Most of it is just local weather created by the temperature of the land. And what tends to happen is that in the mornings we have a very light offshore breeze, which means that the wind is blowing off the shore from the land onto the sea. And what it does is it actually blows into the front of the waves and it blows up the face and it grooms them really nice and smooth. And you typically have these nice clean walls of water coming towards you, and then you have all of this spray coming off the back of the wave like that. And it looks beautiful. And we really like that as surfers because it gives us this clean face. What then happens typically about sort of 11 o'clock is the land heats up, gets really hot, and all of the air rises off the land like steam coming off a saucepan, and so air gets sucked in from the ocean to fill the space on the land where all of that air has risen. The water doesn't change temperature nearly as much as the land does during the day, so that's why that happens. So you get all this air sucked in from the ocean onto the land, so instead of blowing off the shore, it's blowing onto the shore. So we call that an onshore wind, and it blows the waves over, it blows all of the white water down the front of the waves, and it creates lots of chop in the water because it's got all of this water to mess up, whereas when the wind is blowing offshore, the only bit of water that it's blowing on really between the wave and the beach is just that couple of yards of ocean, so it's not enough room for it to really chop it up. So when you're surfing onshore waves, the waves don't get nearly as steep, but you do have these bumps in the face, and quite often when it's really onshore you can surf the wave perfectly but nosedive just because the board went into a chop, into a bit of water. It's also very difficult to be carving nice big turns when the waves are onshore because again you've got all these bumps and you can be carving your turn really nicely and then suddenly you hit a little bit of chop and it takes all of your speed out of your turn, a little bit like when you are bouncing on a trampoline and you bend your knees at the wrong moment and instead of springing back up you suddenly stay down on the trampoline. So it can have that kind of effect for us as surfers. It's still nice to go out when it's onshore though, especially sort of as a beginner, not worrying too much about doing big carving turns if you're a level 2 surfer, for example, because it means the waves don't get as steep. So it can be nice, but it's a question of how strong the wind is. If it's howling onshore, it's not so great to get in there. If it's a light onshore breeze, it's not going to matter too much. In fact, it could be great because a lot of the more experienced surfers have got out of the water. Okay, so offshore, steeper waves, a little bit smoother, a little bit faster. If you get a really strong offshore breeze, it can actually be quite difficult because just as you're trying to paddle into the wave to actually catch it, you can actually sometimes, as I'm paddling down my wave like that, you get wind coming up and blowing you almost off the back of the wave like that. So we're really trying to, again, get that nose down as close to the water as you can, get that gap between the front of the board and the water to be as small as you can when the wind's really strong offshore. So as a rule of thumb, kind of a 10 mile an hour, a 5 to 10 mile an hour offshore breeze is really nice for pretty much any surf spot in the world. 5 to 10 miles an hour onshore, not too bad. If you start having like a 15, 20 mile an hour wind onshore, probably forget about it. Surfing in the white water, no problem. Out the back, it's just going to be too choppy. And again, you have a sort of 15, 20 mile an hour offshore wind, that might be a bit too strong too. A lot of places are really nice when you've got no wind at all, and that's what we have sort of first thing in the morning at sunrise here at Guiones, almost every morning. So quite a lot, especially when people are staying at the surf camp, at Innocent Surf Camp, we'll take them down really early because that's just beautiful when the ocean is oily smooth. But there are some point breaks in the world, waves where the wave peels for a really long time, where if there's no wind, the wave actually breaks in sections and it has to have a little bit of an offshore wind to hold the wave up and make it peel smoothly so that all of those sections link up together. So there we go, a little bit of a sort of rough guide to off and onshore winds. We're very lucky down here on the equator in Nosara, Costa Rica, because we've got such predictable winds every day. You will find that when you're surfing sort of down south and up north, if you're in California or Europe or down in southern Australia or Chile or somewhere like that, that the winds aren't changing every day according to the temperature. The winds are sort of changing over the weeks as you have different low pressure systems move in. So the winds will be as a result of a big weather system, which you'll look at on the internet or news, rather than just the local temperature changes. So they're a little bit less predictable, and that's one of the reasons why we moved Innocent Surf School down to the tropics, so that we could take advantage of how predictable and mechanical the weather and waves are. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Cheerio.